Hey, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. It's time to start our real estate lesson plan for the day. So, my name is Tim Jensen. I'm your instructor. We're going to go over our homework from last night first, chapters 12 and 13. And then today we're going to be discussing chapters 14 and 15. Now, first couple of few announcements, then I'll do the homework. Number one, as always, no recording of classroom is permitted by the Real Estate Commission. No audio, video, pictorial, any kind of recording is forbidden by the Real Estate Commission of any pre-licensing courses. Also, please, no posting of any links on our discussion board. Unless you have cleared the link with me previously, we do not allow that. We have had serious problems in the past, and we don't want to keep that going. Again, I shouldn't have to say it, but please no foul language during our discussions. If you're having connection issues, there's a couple remedies. Number one, close out any and all other operating programs or apps on your device. They tend to draw away bandwidth, and we need all your priority to connect with a strong signal. Also, if you're losing a connection, having trouble, you can hit that little semicircular button with a little arrow on it up by your address bar. That refreshes your connection. You may have to log in, but you won't lose any time. If you lose more than half an hour of time or more, then that's a problem. But if just a few minutes, not an issue. If you have any administrative questions, like where do I find a resource for this? How do I do that? Where do I know about doing that? Where do I record my hours or whatever? You can always go to recareercenter.com and look up student resource areas and find the information you want, or wait till noon where one of our administrative staff will log on with you and answer those questions. They'll be on for about 15, 20 minutes, so please don't wander away, do something, and come back and start asking questions. Chances are it's already been asked or that they're already logged off. If you have any other questions about real estate matters or not sure of something, at the end of the day, I always stick around and take any and all questions. I also provide my email address at the end of the day if you want to reach out to me on a private matter. I will give you the heads up that I don't get involved in students' lives, personal or professional. But if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to see if I can find a resource or answer your question for you. We do take breaks, one at 10:30 for half an hour. We take one at lunchtime at 12 o'clock for 1 hour. We take one at 2:30 for half an hour, and we finish up the day at 4:30. And once again, I always try to remind everyone, please pre-read your chapters before you come to school. It makes for much better discussion, comprehension, and understanding of the material. If you don't, then you're playing catch up in class, and that's never a good thing to do. So again, a strong advisory warning here, please pre-read your chapters before you come to school. So, announcements over. Here's the homework question answers for last night, chapters 12 and 13. So for chapter 12, the homework question answers are: number one, D for dog, 2, B for boy, 3C, 4C, 5C, 6, D as in dog, 7, B for boy, 8, D as in dog, 9, C, and 10, B for boy. Again, chapter 12 homework answers are: number 1, D, dog, 2, B, boy, 3C, 4C, 5C, 6D, dog, 7B, boy, 8D, dog, 9C, and 10B, boy. For chapter 13, the homework answers are: number 1, C, 2, D as in dog, 3C, 4D as in dog, 5C, 6B as in boy, 7A, 8A, 9D as in dog, and 10C. Again, chapter 13, the homework answers are: 1, C, 2, D, dog, 3C, 4D dog, 5C, 6B boy, 7A, 8A, 9D dog, and 10C. Did anybody have any questions regarding chapters 12 or 13 homework quizzes? Chapter 13, number 4. 13, number 4. The clause that makes a mortgage unassumable. Definition 229 of alienation clauses, the lender has the choice declaring the entire debt due and owing and permitting the buyer to assume the loan. Was there a question, David? It sounds like you're just reading from the book. Was there a question? The alienation clause is the one that the answer is correct. Not the acceleration clause, the alienation clause is the correct answer. I'm sorry. Alienation, yeah, alienation clause is the lender has the choice declaring the entire, no, that's the acceleration clause. Let's go to specific page you're referring to, 229. Okay. An alienation clause provides that on the sale of the property, the alienation clause provides that on the sale of the property, the lender has a choice of either declaring the entire debt to be immediately due and owing, correct, it has to be paid off at closing, but that does not include unearned interest. It's different than the acceleration clause where unearned interest is due, so that's different. Or permitting the buyer to assume the loan, correct. I'm still not understanding your question. Homework questions answers 1 through 4. Yvonne, we did that already. For which chapter are you looking for, Yvonne? Chapter 12, number 10. Why is it not A? 12, number 10. New Jersey Anti-Eviction Act provides, with only a few exceptions, that tenants who are current with their rent payments may not be evicted. Why is it not A? Unless the landlord obtains a court order. Because the answer is D, under no circumstance. I'm sorry, it was B, solely on the grounds of foreclosure. That's right. So, all right. Anybody else with a question? I'm not sure what your questions are. I did explain what the answers were, but I'm not sure what your questions were. But does anybody else have any questions about the homework before we move on for chapters 14 and 15? Okay, not seeing any, I'm going to moderate the conversation and we are going to move on. All right, chapter 14 is where we're at today. And if you've got the big hard-covered 14th edition book, we're on page 235. We're going to be talking about financing. This is financing 1. We're going to talk about things about loans, different types of payment structures. We're going to talk about conventional FHA and VA loans this morning, and this afternoon we're going to be talking about all types of different types of loans, as well as primary and secondary mortgage markets. All right. So when you complete this chapter, you should be able to describe issues concerning mortgage financing, including various payment plans, as well as be able to distinguish between conventional, insured, guaranteed loans, and New Jersey homebuyer programs. So mortgage financing, what is it? All right. So normally when people buy real estate, normally they don't have cash to buy real estate with. Most people require financing to do it. There are a few folks that can buy things with cash. God bless them. But for the majority of purchasers, they need to finance the purchase. Therefore, you're going to have to put some sort of down payment for the bank to be able to give you financing. They're going to charge you interest, which yesterday I told you was profit that the bank makes for lending money. So just using a quick whiteboard definition of what a loan to value ratio is, let's say you're buying a $100,000 house and you have $20,000 down payment. $20,000 is the purchase price. You're putting $20,000 down, which means you need to finance $80,000. That, my friends, is the loan amount. Compared to the purchase price on this loan, you would have an 80% loan to value ratio. Loan to value ratio. 100,000 minus 20,000 means 80,000 is financed. The loan, the mortgage amount compared to the purchase price, is the loan to value ratio. All right. And equity, as I described yesterday, equity equals value minus debt. So if you have a value of 100,000 and debt of 80,000, then your equity would be 20,000. It's not rocket science, guys. It's just basic definitions and what they mean. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions about these basic concepts? Excuse me. And I'm not seeing any, so wonderful. Let's move on. All right. Now, interest rates. How do they determine interest rates? And how do they affect me as a borrower? That's a good question. Interest, as I said, is the profit that a bank charges to lend money. What influences interest rates? Well, there's a lot of things that influence interest rates. There's the Federal Reserve. There's the general economic conditions in the world. There's amount being financed versus the value of the item. There's credit background that affects interest rates. There's the borrower's ability to pay, his finances, his bank account, his income, et cetera, all affect the interest rate that a person will charge, and everyone is not the same. Some people qualify for what they call prime interest, the lowest possible consumer interest price, while others don't. It's just a matter of your ability to pay, your credit history, your income, your down payment, the purchase price, everything else. So as changes occur in money markets, interest rates are affected. The Federal Reserve, when it speaks, affects interest rates. They can adjust upwards or downwards, and banks follow. Therefore, borrowers have choices as far as how they want to finance their property. They can get fixed rate mortgages where the bank takes the risk of any movement in the interest rate, or they can get adjustable rate mortgages where the consumer takes on the risk of any movement in the interest rate. There's conventional loans, the two-party transactions, there are FHA loans, government insured loans, and VA loans, which are government guaranteed loans. So there's all kinds of different financing techniques out there. There's also seller financing options where a seller could float the loan for the buyer by either giving them a note and a repayment schedule, advancing them cash that they can use to purchase, or having them assume or assign debts. It's possible, not recommended, but there's many different ways to finance purchases of property. So let's talk about fixed rate loans first. But before we do, we have to talk about how you pay off your loan and something called amortization. So on the top of page 237 in your hardcover 14th edition textbook, there's a graph. It's called the level payment authorization plan. It's a amortization schedule. What does that mean? Well, if any of you folks are of the Italian persuasion out there, you know what morta means. Yes, morta means death. To amortize a loan, you kill off slowly. Technically, it's what it means. So an amortized loan is one where you kill it off slowly over time. So you have an amortization schedule that shows you how much your payments are per month over the repayment schedule. And it even breaks down as to how much interest per payment you're paying. On this chart, that would be the dark area, and how much principal you're repaying, the light shaded area. As you can see very quickly in the beginning years of the loan, you're paying almost all primarily interest payments to the bank and very little principal. But as time goes on, you're paying more principal as opposed to the interest portion of the loan, which tells me one thing. The bank takes its interest or profit in the upfront years of the loan first before the debt gets paid off. That's the way they do things. So an amortization loan shows a constant payment over the life of the loan and how much each payment is being contributing to. So it applies to interest first, then to principal. So as the life of the loan progresses, it switches from interest heavy payment at the beginning to principal heavy payment at the back end until you pay the debt off. Any questions about what amortization is? Another basic concept you have to understand in mortgage financing. Good, not seeing any questions. Then let's move on. Okay, by the way, guys, time out. Update on our schedule for this week. So please pay attention, guys. Put down the crayons with your kid and just listen for a minute. Tomorrow we have class. The snow is not started to predict. It's not predicted to start until somewhere around noon time tomorrow. We'll get a full day in. Thursday is looking questionable. If you're worried about schedules, and if we do miss Thursday, then we only miss one day. We're not going to miss two. We will be here tomorrow. I will be here tomorrow. The girls aren't here. That's their business, but I will be here tomorrow. The snow won't start till noon, and I will drive home in the snow and make it there. But Thursday morning is looking questionable. But for now, know that tomorrow we're on. We're here. Thursday, again, questionable, but the snow should stop somewhere around noontime. We'll make a decision early Thursday morning as to whether there will be school or not. So if you have questions on Thursday morning, please don't inundate the school. There's nobody here. Look at our website. We'll make an announcement there. And whether they send you an email reminder or not, it's up to the girls to decide. But if you go to the website early Thursday morning, let's say before or after 7 or 8 o'clock, it'll be posted on the website whether there is class or not. So again, one last reminder. I will be here tomorrow for class. We are having class. Thursday is questionable. Whether it occurs or not, stand by your computers on Thursday morning. Look for a sign from us on our website. But we will give you a heads up before class starts. So just want to make sure everybody was filled in on what we're planning on doing. Again, I will be here tomorrow. There is class tomorrow. But Thursday, again, is up in the air. So we'll let you know Thursday morning. All right. I'm going to move on. Any other questions before I move on here? Anybody? Okay, Maximiliano, you have a question. What's that? Oh, Apparently not. Okay, let's move on. We're going to moderate the conversation and move on. So, fixed rate loans. What are those, Tim? Those are loans where the borrower makes payments based on a fixed interest rate for the entire length of the loan history. Today, interest rates, as I was saying the other day, are less than 2.5% on a 30-year mortgage, let's say, 2.5% on average. That means if you qualify and can get that rate, your payments are based on 2.5% per month for the entire length of the loan amount. If interest rates go up in the bank, it's not affecting you because you have a guaranteed locked in fixed interest. Whatever fluctuations occur in the banks, and they take the risk on that. But you pay at the rate you were guaranteed in the fixed rate loan, and it does not change. So you can predict over time exactly how to budget for your monthly payments to the bank. So there's no problem about worrying about if the interest rates go up, what do I do? If the payment has to go up, what do I do? Your principal and interest payments will stay constant the entire length of the loan. There's different types of fixed rate payments. There's the fully amortized loan, the one we're talking about, where you take a loan out for, let's say, 30 years, which means you pay back at a fixed rate for 30 years. Nothing changes. You're paying interest and principal in your payments to the bank. There's also something called a straight payment, which is an interest-only payment. What? You'll pay no principal in your loan payments? Correct. All you're paying is interest only. Well, how does that benefit a buyer? Well, there's different things that you can think of. Let's say I am a corporate C-class executive being bounced around from city to city every 5 to 7 years. And I buy a house in, let's say, Paramus, New Jersey, just using an example. And I lived there for 4 or 5 years. Then I got to bounce over to Seattle. Then in 5 years from then, I got to bounce down to Houston and all around the country. I'm being shuffled around. Well, it would be silly for me to take out a fixed rate loan and pay principal and interest because I'm not going to be in the house very long. I want to live there as cheaply as possible. If I have strong enough credit and a good income, I could qualify for a straight payment with the bank, which says, Mr. Consumer, you only pay interest only to us. However, after a certain date, 7 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever the bank and you indicate, you must pay the bank a balloon payment for the entire principal amount borrowed. What? Yeah, let me use a whiteboard. So let's say I borrowed $500,000 to live in a house. All right. That means that $500,000 stays $500,000, even though I'm making interest payments to the bank every month for, let's say, 6 years. Every month I'm making interest payments. None of the principal has to be paid back at this time. But at one day, let's say it's 7 years and I complete my 7 years of payments, I have to pay a balloon payment of the entire principal amount at once. However, being a savvy C-class executive, I know that that's due after the 7th year. So after the 6th year, I put the house up for sale. Now remember, when I purchased the property, I probably had to put a down payment. Probably I'm going to say 20%. So the house was actually worth $600,000. Now, after making the interest payments for 6 years, the 7th year this balloon payment is due, I sell the house, and the house actually went up in value because of appreciation to $700,000. Well, that's okay. I sell the house for $700,000. I pay off the balloon payment at $500,000, and I got $200K in equity right then and there that I'm going to walk away with as profit. I only put $100,000 down to buy this. So after 5 years, I actually made $100,000 on the sale of the property, even though I paid off no principal payments during the life of the loan. accepted one big balloon payment at the end. And if the markets stay good or go up, I'll make money on it. But here's the risk. What if the market went down and it's only worth 400,000 now and I still owe 500? Then I'm in the hole 100K. I'm going to walk away with deficiency judgment. My credit's going to go to the toilet. So even though it sounds attractive and short-term financing methods certainly would show that this pays off tremendously to me, I'm running a very big risk in hoping that the market stays stable or actually go up over time. You may not understand what an interest-only or straight payment does or what it accomplishes. Anybody? Okay, again, not seeing any questions. Let's move on. You could have, I'm sorry, there seems to be a question, so Michael, I'll wait. And Kimberly. A lot of people coming in, joining us late, so you've missed, obviously, the first 20 minutes of discussion. Guys, it's up to you to catch up. I'm not going to go back and repeat everything, just so you know. Is that interest-only loan the partially amortized loan? No, we haven't even talked about partially amortized loan yet, so hang on, pal. We're going to get there. The straight term would be used for first-time mortgages. No, would not. This is someone who's a very experienced buyer and seller with a big income and bank account. It is risky. It's not for first-time buyers. So the interest is paid on the borrowed amount. And is that interest going to stay the same for the remainder of the time? Yes. And Matilda has a question. Oops, I'm sorry. Why does it make sense for home improvements? What? I'm not understanding here. Matilda, I don't understand your question, how it relates to a straight or a fixed rate interest payment. And Tiffany, this sounds like something a person who flips houses would use, right? No. In the book, it says that it's an example of what you could use it for. Yes. Well, Danielle, if you're talking, why not? If you're talking about flipping homes, you don't want to pay any mortgage payments or anything at all. Is there a cap for straight mortgages? Cap is a term for adjustable rate mortgages, James. We'll get there. I promise we will. Guys, please, if you got questions, please stick to the concepts we've discussed, not stuff we're going to be discussing because you're trying to jump ahead and we're not there yet. Please, guys, I have a structured presentation that helps you understand the material. If we start scattering all over the place, no one's going to understand what's going on. What would you use for? We're not in this discussion of how to flip houses here, guys. We're talking about fixed rate loans. We're not about flipping houses. So let me moderate this conversation and bring us back to the topics that we are discussing. We're talking about financing a home, and we're talking about a fixed rate loan payment. We haven't discussed different types of loans, what they're used for, or anything. We'll discuss that today, I promise. But right now, I'm just trying to teach you basic concepts so we can build off that. You guys want to run before we're crawling. Right now, we're crawling. Eventually, we're going to walk, and then we're going to run. So hold on, guys. I know you got questions. I know you're anticipatory. but we will get there, I promise. So we talked about a fixed rate loan payment. We talked about a straight interest only loan payment. There's also something called a partially amortized loan that works like a straight loan, except you're making interest and principal payments for a period of time, but still must provide a balloon payment at some point that was prearranged in the loan. We'll give you a loan with principal and interest payments. We'll structure one, let's say a 30-year repayment schedule, but after the 11th year, we want to be paid out in total principal. Therefore, during the period of repayments, you're only partially amortizing the loan. And at some point, you have to pay off whatever balance of principal is owing the bank in one big balloon payment. That's known as a partially amortized loan. And then there are biweekly loan payments. Biweekly meaning every 2 weeks. Now, please think about how a year is structured. You have 52 weeks in a year. That means if you made a payment every 2 weeks, you technically make 26 half payments, right? Because 52 divided by 2, you make 26 half payments, which equal to 13 monthly payments. In effect, your biweekly loan is paying one extra full month's payment per calendar year, because if you're paying one per month, you're paying 12 monthly payments. But if you're paying 2 half monthly payments every 2 weeks, then you're going to make 13 full monthly payments at the end of the calendar year, and you pay off your debt faster and save some interest rates over the debt length of the loan. So this is an example of a bi-weekly mortgage. You pay every 2 weeks. Now, there is another way that you can beat the bank at their game. Well, not beat, but certainly do better with the bank. And that is, as I caution, and I tell every first-time home buyer this, if you, Mr. Consumer or Miss Consumer, have the ability to then make one extra monthly payment per year on your 12 monthly payment schedule. Yeah, it's like an additional 1 month payment in your schedule. But when you make that payment, make sure you write on the check, payment to be applied to principal only. So if you think about that amortization schedule, and I send a check to the bank to be applied towards principal only, then it pays out on the principal on the back end of the loan, reducing the principal every year, so that over the course of your payment history on a 30-year mortgage, you're actually going to reduce the term of the loan down by as much as 7 years and save tens of thousands of dollars in interest payments. Not a lot of people think about this, but if you do think about it, if you could pay off your debt faster and save interest, isn't it worth it? But again, the secret here is if you're making 12 monthly payments, to send one extra payment, address the check to be applied to principal only, so the back end of a loan shrinks faster, your term is much shorter, and you save tens of thousands of dollars in interest. But biweekly will help you accomplish that, but not to the extent that just one extra payment per year to address towards principal only would. So, any questions about partially amortized or biweekly loans? Again, please keep your questions pertinent to these topics being discussed. We will be expanding on these things later. If interest rate is low as today, then why should be try? I'm sorry, Yang. If interest rate is as low as today, then we should be, I guess, trying to make the payment as long as possible, right? That's up to you to decide, Yang. I can't decide what is good or what works best for you. That's a personal preference. But again, paying off your debt faster by having payments applied towards principal will save you substantial interest and time on your loan. Straight term loan and balloon payment is the same thing. No. Straight term loans have a balloon payment applied to them, but so do partially amortized loans. Was there any other questions? With biweekly payment, how does the extra money payment get applied to them? Just like a regular payment. The majority of your payment goes to interest first, then the balance is applied to the principal. So a biweekly is just like a regular payment, except that you're making one extra and it gets applied to interest and principal instead of just principal, as I was talking about. I see there are other questions. Why might someone choose to go forward with a part? Okay, guys, again, let me just remind you why people do these things, why things are given choices has nothing to do with the topics being discussed. All you have to remember is there's something called a straight loan, a fixed rate loan, a partially amortized loan, a biweekly loan. You have to know what a balloon payment is. The reason why people do things, there could be millions of variables out in the marketplace. So again, please just understand, my job is to not teach you the philosophical mind of the buyer. That's not what this course is about. This course is about teaching you the principle and concepts. You need to pass a test. So again, I just want to steer you back into the lane where we're at. Is there a loan limit in straight term loans? Is there a, no, it's whatever the income and background of the buyer can justify. This has to do with what you're talking about now as well as yesterday. You mentioned that you can pay off your loan early without penalty. Does this mean you pay the principal? Does this mean you pay the principal off early? You aren't still on the hook for, I'm sorry, Michael, I'm trying to understand what you're asking. You mentioned that you can pay off your loan early without penalty. Correct. Does that mean you pay the principal off early? In effect, yes, yes. You aren't still on the hook for the future years of interest. No, if you say, hey, bank, I just won Powerball. I want to pay my loan off. What's the debt as of today? Then the principal amount plus any interest payment that they've earned to date is due to the bank today. Future interest payments of what they would have collected is their loss because they're not going to collect it. In other words, paying off a 30-year loan in entirety after 10 years of regular payments and paying the remaining 20 years of principal. Okay, I'm losing you, Mike. I think you're trying to overcomplicate and overthink something. Stick to the basics, my friend. All right, let's move on then. I'm going to moderate the conversation again, just move on. Again, guys, please. I understand your thirst for knowledge. And if we were sitting over beers and cocktails, and me having whiskey and scotch, we can discuss these topics all day long. And this would be great roundtable discussions. But for purposes of class instruction, all you have to know is that there are things called fixed rate loans, interest-only loans, partially amortized loans, and biweekly loans. That's all you have to understand to pass an exam. So again, I would love to indulge you on personal time, but in class time, we have to talk about this stuff. So let's just move on. Now, there are other types of payment plans called adjustable rate mortgages. As I said earlier, in a fixed rate loan, the bank takes the risk of any change in interest rate. In an adjustable rate mortgage, the borrower takes on the responsibility of any changes to the interest rate due to a move in something called an index. So there's a whole bunch of terms here that apply to adjustable rate mortgages. But in effect, an adjustable rate mortgage can and often does change over time. My house purchase of 1985. At the time, fixed rate loans were 10.5%. The bank said, Tim, if you want, we can get you an adjustable rate loan where your first 2 years are at 9.5%, a full point under prime. And I thought about it for a while, and then I realized if I can get 1% less on the loan, then I could borrow more money for the same cost of repayment and buy a bigger house, which I did. And it was great because my loan was structured that for the first 2 years, I paid 1 point less than prime. But after 2 years, I would be adjusted 2 points upward. So the percentage rates. So the percentage rate that increased during the adjustment period is called a cap. The interest rate went up 2%. Therefore, my 9.5% loan after 2 years now is 11.5%. Now I'm paying 1 point over what I could have paid at prime, but I got more house. But now my payments grew, and I'm paying more money out of my income every month to support the house. I also, the adjustable rate loan was the following. It had 3 adjustment periods every 2 years. Each adjustment period had a 2% cap on increase or decrease of the interest rate. Over the course of 3 adjustment periods, the total my interest rate could go up at 2% per adjustment was 6%. That would be the ceiling. They couldn't charge me above it when it went to the highest rate, which meant my 9.5% loan could have gone to 15.5%. That's a very big difference in interest rates, and certainly would have impacted my ability to enjoy my lifestyle instead of making all my money to pay to the bank. So the ceiling is the total amount of increase over the adjustment periods. The cap is how much the adjustment is per adjustment period. There's some other terms here. Index, margin, and we're going to talk about worst case at the end of our discussion, but let me use a whiteboard to try to explain. So if I'm a candidate for an adjustable rate mortgage, my loan is going to be tied to an index. An index is a market indicator of whether things go up or down or whatever. So let's say we tie the index to COLA, cost of living adjustment. Okay, that's my loan is based on a COLA index. So right now the COLA index is 2%, let's say. Now, I'm going to pay this 2% because that's what the bank has to get to meet the COLA obligation. The bank also ties in something called a margin. That's the bank's profit. Remember, this is the cost of the money that we're basing our loan on. The margin is the bank's profit. So they say, we're going to charge 2%. So my rate is actually now 4%. Now, this would make sense if the current rate was somewhere around 5%. That means I could save 1 whole point on financing the property because I'm just paying 4% when the actual prime rate is 5%. And I'm just using numbers I'm not talking about current interest rates, I'm just using numbers. So now that, I'm going to use another whiteboard here, the index was 2%, the margin was 2%, and my rate is based on 4%. Everything's hokey pokey, honky dory, I make my payments and we're all cool. Now the first adjustment period hits, and the index went up 1 point. Now I'm paying 3% through the index. The margin always stays the same. So now I'm paying 5% on the interest rate. Another year or so go by, another index movement. This time it went up 2 points. Now it's 5. The bank's rate still, the margin stays the same at 2. Now I'm paying 7% for the loan. Boy, I started out at 4, now I'm paying at 7, almost double. Well, that's what happens in an adjustable rate. The index is what dictates the movement in the consumer rate. The margin the bank charges is always the same. The margin is the profit margin that the bank takes on the loan as profit. The consumer took the risk of the index moving upwards or downwards over time, and then whenever it does, the consumer has to pay the difference. So in this case, my rate started at 4. Since the index went up by 1, it went up to 5. If the index went up 2, then my rate goes to 7 after that. Does anybody not understand what I'm talking about in an adjustable rate mortgage or any of the terms we presented? Explain cap. Again, once again, cap is how much of a movement in my interest payment can go up or down during a specific adjustment period. What's a ceiling again? Ceiling is the maximum amount of increase over the total amount of adjustment periods. So in that case I was showing, after the first adjustment, it went up according to the index. That was the cap. And then it went up another time on another, because the cap said if it goes up, I can charge that amount for the bank and I have to pay that. So my rate went up. It's tied to the index, not the bank's profit margin. The margin stays the same. Again, I hope I explained those terms, but was there any other questions? And again, you can always read the definitions in the book. They're there for everybody to read. Michael, did you have a question? In the example you just gave, you mentioned that in the example, it started at 2% ingress and 2% margin and 4% total. But you said that the actual interest was 5%. So you saved the point. Why weren't you paying the 5%? Because, Michael, as I was going to talk about, but since you brought it up, guys, please, let's not jump ahead. But since you asked, usually the bank gives an introductory teaser rate, under market interest rate, to get you in as a hook. Look, that's how it got me. You can buy more house for the same payment because the interest rate's lower. You have more house buyer. I fell for it and I bought the house. And then my cap went up the maximum per adjustment period. Now I'm paying over fixed rates. Now the bank's making good profit and paying off the adjustment. So no issue for the bank. But for me, it's less affordable over time. It says cap can be added to borrow amount or goes to next period. Let me see what you're saying. So the loan agreement may be set at cap. For example, 2% of any single adjustment. If the interest rates, or like the interest went up 3% by the time of adjustment, the interest rate could be raised by only 2%. Okay. Depending on the particular mortgage, the extra 1% may be treated one of 3 ways. It could be saved by the lender to be used at the next adjustment period, even though rates have fallen in the meantime. It could be absorbed by the lender with no further consequence to the buyer. Or the shortfall, the unpaid 1%, could be added to the amount borrowed so that the principal would increase interest of decreasing negative amortization. Correct. In other words, let me try to use a whiteboard here again. Maybe I know, listen guys, this is an adult education class. Adults are the hardest people to educate, believe it or not, because there's many different learning styles. Some people are auditory. Some people are visual. They have to see it. So let's put it up on a whiteboard. The cap equals the amount an interest rate can go up or down during an adjustment period. So the bank says that cap is 2% per adjustment period. Then I'm going to pay the 2% up or down movement. But if it goes up 3%, I'm still only paying the 2%. Because that's the cap, how much maximum it could go up or down. That 1% difference of the 2 to 3%, they can say, forgive it. Or they can save it and tack it onto the next adjustment period. Even if the rates go down, they can tack on that 1% on the next loan adjustment. Or they could just build it into the principal on the back end as additional money being paid. So you're going to pay more over the long term. Or if it goes down, we're going to talk about worst case scenario in a few minutes, so I don't want to jump ahead. But again, once again, the cap is how much the mortgage interest rate can go up or down per adjustment period. If there's excess in the adjustment of the index, they can save it and apply it in the next adjustment period, or forgive it, or apply it to the loan on the back end. So there are options for the bank to treat it in different ways. I hope that cleared it up. But was there any other questions before I moved on? It did. Okay, good. Apparently there's some more people with questions. So the cap also works if the rate goes lower. Correct, Michael. So let me give you an example. When I borrowed money at 9.5%, for the first 2 years, I was paying under prime because it was an artificial teaser rate to get me in. But my cap was 2% per adjustment period, and it went up. Actually, the rate went up more than 2%, but my cap was 2%. So it went up to 11.5%. Now I'm paying more than prime at the introductory rate. And then the cap went up 1%, but they saved the 1%. So in actuality, my cap went up 2% the following adjustment period. And now I'm paying 13.5%. They can, remember, save that 1% or whatever, and they tacked it onto my adjustment period in the next one. So now after 4 years, I was originally paying 9.5%. I was paying 11.5% for the second 2 years. And now for the third 2-year adjustment period, I'm paying 13.5% with the threat that if the cap goes up again, I could go as high as 15.5%. Good. Thank God the interest rate came down and my interest rate decreased back down to 11.5%. So the cap works up or down. So we talked about what happens when it goes up. Let's talk now about what happens if a cap or the interest rate goes down during the adjustment period. So let's, again, I'm going to pull up a whiteboard because some people need the visual. I start off that the index was, let's say in this case, it's 2%, the margin's 2%. Okay, so you're paying 4. The index rate goes down a point. Now it's 1. Bank charges 2, I'm paying 3. It goes down again another half point. So now I'm paying 0.5 plus 2. Now I'm paying 2.5%. The bank was projecting that hopefully the interest rate would stay the same or go up so they can pay off that interest amount to the funding sources and not get hurt. But the fact is, I'm tied to an index that went down, which means now my rate goes down accordingly to the index. Each time it adjusts downwards, I pay less. Since I'm taking on the risk of loss, the bank is not. Whatever the difference in the interest not collected is now added as additional principal on the back end of the loan, and the debt actually grows. This is called worst case or negative amortization, where the bank was betting that the interest rate would go up or at least stay the same, when in reality it went down. Therefore, my payments went down. The bank didn't collect enough for the payments needed to satisfy the index, and whatever loss the bank experiences, they tack on as additional principal on the back end of the loan, and the debt grows. Negative amortization. Did anybody not understand the worst case scenario or negative amortization? Okay, not seeing any questions. Let's move on. Convertibility. Just talked about negative amortization. Convertibility. My loan my adjustable rate loan had a lock-in feature or a conversion feature after the end of the second adjustment period. Meaning, since my rate now is 13.5%, I could say, hey, I don't want to risk any more increase in index. I could have the loan converted to a fixed rate loan at 13.5% for the remainder of the term. And I would have been happy if interest rates continue to go up. But as it was, I noticed the interest rates were falling. So I bet that my adjustment would go down on the next adjustment period. In fact, it did. If I had converted to a fixed rate at the time, I would have paid a higher fixed interest rate. But as it was, it came down. And then as it came back down to 11.5%, I said, let's lock in now. I could convert it that time as well. So I did. Most adjustable rates offer a convertibility at some point in the loan history. However, it must be after the bank makes back any loss it experienced after the first adjustment period, at the teaser rate. Remember, it went up, and they're always going to raise you after your first adjustment period because they need to make back any shortfall of interest they should have collected. And they'll make that back in the second adjustment, in the first adjustment. Then we talked about initial interest rates and how they could move. Assumability, and I'll tell you this, up until 1989, pretty much every loan out in the market was assumable. But after 1989, not so much. In fact, most loans today are not assumable whatsoever, unless the lender and the borrowers both agree to have it done that way. But the borrower who's going to be assigned the loan under assumability has to qualify for the worst case scenario. So if they're stepping in when interest rates are low and the index says it could go up this much during this guy's ownership of the loan, then he has to qualify at the highest level of interest that the bank could charge him under the adjustment. So adjustable rate loans are best for short-term ownership, 2, 5, 7 years, then get sold. But again, you wouldn't want to use this for a flip or any other type of financing for a flip. All right, moving on. You could have a hybrid mortgage. It's a combination of fixed rates and adjustable rates where it starts off at a fixed rate, but at some point, usually 3 to 7 to 10 years, no more than that, it converts to an ongoing adjustable rate. That's a risky loan. Why do people buy it? Who cares? That it exists is all you have to know. Who uses them? Nobody I know of. But that it exists is all you have to know. Interest-only loans. We talked about a straight payment where interest is paid, but you had to pay a balloon payment for the full amount. An interest-only loan usually offers lower payments because the debt's never really amortized. There's still that principal outstanding. It is a risky proposition. Usually, interest-only loans are for short-term financing projects. Very risky because what if the markets go down? Then the principal amount goes down, which means when you have to pay off that principal, it's not going to be worth it to you because the house is worth less than what you're paying off to the bank for. It's risky because you have to qualify at a very high income level and have a nice big fat bank account to be able to get interest-only payments. Or it must be backed by some sort of collateralized property that has equity already built into it for some reason, like a construction loan. And we're going to talk about that later as well today. So an interest-only loan is usually for short-term financing projects. There used to be something called a bridge loan, and we're going to talk about that later today as well, which is a short-term interest-only loan to accomplish a certain objective. And we'll talk about that soon. But it is a risky type of loan. Now, okay, there apparently are questions, so go ahead. What's your questions? Natasha and Matilda. Well, maybe not Natasha. Well, there is. I'm confused because I see people coming and going all the time here. Just want if there's any questions. Again, keep them to like a sentence question if you can. Please don't ask me paragraph sentence. That means I have to read them, have multiple stage answers, and we're just delaying, so please don't do that. Farhana has a question. What is that? Oh, so is 13% the national max the index can go up to? Boy, no, it's whatever the bank said. How is a fixed rate payment different from an adjustment? Boy, where have you been all morning, Matilda? My goodness, I think I've discussed it 6 ways to Sunday already. What is the major difference between interest only and straight payment? Pretty much the same thing, except in one you have to make a balloon payment, the other is risky for different reasons. I know we shouldn't focus on the why, but why would someone do an interest only loan? Again, it's not for us to discuss, but I'll give you examples later of different types of interest only. When I worked for Coldwell Banker as a marketing assistant, we've seen a lot of interest only loans, particularly on luxury homes. Exactly. Mainly stockbrokers, CEOs get a high bonus in the year. Yes, exactly. They have the high net income, the big bank accounts, the fat wallets. They can qualify to do this because they're more risky in their investments. They'll take the risk that the property might go down a few bucks because they may have a cash reserve that can pay that off and not worry. But if they only have a balloon payment and the market went up, they're going to make money on the sale of the property. But you have to have that income to be able to qualify for interest-only loans. Good point, Natasha. Thank you. And Matt, you had a question. Or not? Okay. Not seeing any more. Let me moderate conversation and move on. Interest, as we said yesterday and this morning, is profit that the bank charges for the use of their money. Whoever came up with the idea of charging interest was way ahead of their time. Now, from what I understand, and I'm no archaeologist or smart guy, it was some place back around like the beginning of time that someone came up in the mercantile civilizations. Someone came up with the idea that if I lend money out, I could charge an interest based on the amount I lend. So when people pay me back, they pay a percentage of that amount they borrow, and I would make money doing it. And by the way, if a bank or any creditor charges 7% or more in interest rates, the following principle applies. Every 7 years in the loan history, the income from interest doubles. Yes, I said doubles the income from the interest garnered from the loan. Therefore, it's no wonder loans are for 30 years or so, because it gives the amount of interest doubling for opportunities to double over that course of repayment. And when people borrow money, let's say they borrow $100,000. After 30 years, they repay $250,000. But I only borrowed 100. But the cost of the interest was another $150,000 because it's compounded on the amount due every month. So understand, guys, whoever came up with this idea of interest charging was brilliant. And that's how banks make money. By lending money out, charging an interest percentage, and they collect the interest up front as profit. And usually the item that was sold, like the house that's financed by this loan, is sold and pays off the principal at some time. Therefore, the bank is going to make money. When I come back in my next life, I'm going to be a bank. I want to be a bank. But anyway, so when you borrow money, the bank charges a profit called interest and gives you an amortization schedule to show how much you owe per month for the entire length of the loan to pay it off. Now, under tax deductible interest issues, now this is a misprint here and must be corrected, so I'm going to have to make a note that under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2018, The statement, the second bullet, the next bullet point under that is incorrect. It should say limits deductibility of home tax payments to $10,000. Your mortgage interest on your primary marital residence is capped at $750,000 per year on single family residence. Whoever's paying that much money in property interest has got some kind of a house. So here's the tax deductible thing. In our tax code, any interest you pay on your mortgage loan is tax deductible against your income. So let me explain this on a whiteboard. So if you make $100,000 a year in income and you had $15,000 in mortgage interest, then you subtract the $15,000 from your income, and now you only pay taxes based on $85,000 a year. That's the first deduction, is your mortgage interest you're allowed to deduct from your income and pay less taxes every year because of that. So there's a big benefit to owning a home, is the mortgage interest deduction. Then, now prior to 2018, whatever property taxes I paid on my property were completely deductible. However, the Jobs and Tax Cut Act of 2018, it said that only $10,000 is the maximum you can write off for expensive property expenses. So if I have $15,000 in mortgage interest and $10,000 in property taxes, then I have $25,000 in total write off against my income of $100,000, and now I only pay taxes based on $75,000. Did anybody not understand what I'm talking about by deductibility against income? Apparently there's a question or two, so we'll hang on. No questions. Okay, I'm going to move on. Oh, there is. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait. Can I repeat the typo in the text? The second bullet item under tax deductible interest says limits deductibility of home loan interest at $10,000. That's supposed to be limits deductibility of property tax payment to $10,000 a year. That's what it's supposed to say. It used to be whatever you paid in property taxes. Some people pay a lot in property taxes here in the Northeast United States. And it hurts the industrial Northeast as well as any West Coast high-priced towns or anywhere else. But for the heartland America, where average prices are much lower and taxes are practically non-existent compared to ours, it helps them. It doesn't hurt them at all. But it hurts the high income, high tax rate areas the most, us, right here in Jersey. All right, I think I got it, so I'm going to move on. Now, prior to 2018, if you had taken out a home equity loan and you at that point could use the money for any purpose whatsoever, you were allowed to take off any interest that you paid against your home interest loan. But after 2018, they changed it to say if you take out a home equity loan, the only reason you can write off that mortgage interest is if you use the loan for home improvements. Increase the value of your home. Other than that, you are limited to only the mortgage interest on your principal payment mortgage. That's it. All right, moving on. Points. Now, a lot of people have a difficulty understanding what a point is, so I'm going to make it real easy. A whiteboard example is always good. You're buying a $100,000 house. You're putting $20,000 down. you're financing 80% loan to value, right? 80% or 80,000 means 80% as compared to the amount of financing. So your loan is for 80,000 or an 80% LTV. When banks say we need a point, that means 1 point is equivalent to 1% of the loan amount. So on this example, 1 point of $80,000 would be $800. 10% would be 8,000, and 10% of that would be 800. So in this case, if the bank says, we'll give you prime rate if you pay the bank 1 point when you take the loan, that means you have to pay a cash payment to the bank up front of $800 to get the better interest rate. Does anybody have any basic questions about what I'm talking about, what a point is? Again, a point. The bank charges a point for some reason. 1 point is equivalent to 1% of the loan amount, not the purchase price, not the down payment, the loan amount. Was there any questions on that? Not seeing any questions, I'm going to assume that everybody's on the same page. So I'm going to move on. So a point is, it says, upfront prepaid interest to the bank. And I said, interest is profit. Therefore, if a bank charges you points, they're taking more profit up front, which makes them more comfortable with making you the loan for some reason. Because if they make more profit up front, they have less risk of losing on the back end by getting their profit up front. Sometimes they call these discount points, because if a buyer and or seller can pay points, by the way, to a bank, is applied to the bank, then they could give you a better interest rate by lowering the interest rate to whatever the prime rate is. And if they charge you points up front, they have less risk because they're making more profit up front. Typically, banks ask for things like 3 points up front for a guaranteed rate lock of whatever prime is up front, depending on your credit history, your borrowing ability, down payment, everything else. So let's say you're purchasing a $300,000 home, putting 20% down, financing 80% LTV. So in this case, I'm going to ask this question. You're buying a $300,000 home, 20% down payment. If the bank were to say, we want 3 points to give you prime rate, what is the equivalent of 3 points on this scenario? That's an N at the end. If you're buying a house at $300,000 and you're putting 20% down, and the bank says we want 3 points up front, how much are the 3-point equivalents? Alexander, correct. Jared, correct. In other words, if this is true, then they're financing $240,000. Why? Because 20% is 60 grand. 30,000 minus 60,000 is 240,000. 1 point would be 2,400 times 3, or 7,200. You got it. Did anybody not understand how we calculated points on that? Because it is critical that you know these things, because consumers are going to come to you and say, hey, my bank's making this loan, they're charging me 3 points. What's a point and how do I apply it? You better be able to talk to them. It's 1 point is equivalent to 1% of the mortgage or loan amount. And as I said, is often used under what they call discount points to give you a better rate as a result of taking more profit up front, giving the bank a higher level of confidence because they have less risk of losing money because they're getting the profit up front. All right, it looks like we got it, so I'm going to move on. Rate lock. What's that? Rate lock is when you make application for mortgage and they say, dear Mr. Consumer, you have been approved for a mortgage. We will give you a guaranteed rate lock on the mortgage for a period of X amount of days. Usually it's about 90 days, no more. Where if the interest rate goes up, you still get the interest rate we guarantee today. We're going to lock the rate today for the next 90 days. However, if it goes down, we'll give you the benefit and charge you the lower rate. But if it takes longer than 90 days for you to close on a property, then you're going to have to come back to us and we're going to have to recalculate what the rate would be at that time. So a rate lock is where the bank guarantees a specific interest rate to the consumer to start their loan payments if they locate and close on a house within the 90-day period. But if it takes longer, there's no guarantee. We have to recalculate at the time. Did anybody not understand what a rate lock is? I see Mr. Lopez has a question. Is there a charge for a rate lock? No. Banks usually just give that as a matter of consumer interest to give it to you. Excuse me. Couple more questions coming. Or maybe not. I don't know. You guys, you got keyboards open. Was there another question? Are banks willing to do a rate lock just because they want the loan? Possibly. Okay. Anybody else with a question before we move on? All right, I'm not seeing any, so I am going to move on. All right. Now, buy downs. What's a buy down? Same as a discount, except usually buy downs can be achieved by buyer or seller. I'm using an example of a new home builder. He creates products that buyers want to buy, hopefully. A buyer comes in and says, I want to buy your product. He says, I tell you what, we'll give you as part of the closing package up to X amount of dollars as a seller contribution to you. If you would like, you could use it as a buy down against the interest rate the bank is charging you. So when you go to the bank and make application to buy the house, they quote you a rate slightly higher than prime. You can then use that gift, the seller contribution, to buy down the interest rate so you can get a much more affordable payment on the property, thereby assisting the buyer to buy the house. So instead of paying points up front, the mortgage lender will provide buy down money to give to the bank to give you the better rate. It's not actually a point contribution. It's just actually, if you think about it, more down payment they're giving you, called a buy down. Now, there's something also called a PITI payment. So here's a whiteboard, a PITI payment, P-I-T-I. And as the book explains, it means principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So principal is the amount you borrowed, and the interest is the profit the bank charges for lending you this money. So together, your P&I is for the bank repaying the bank repayment for the loan. The taxes are your property taxes. This is bank repay. Sorry, I'm using a mouse to convey this info. So your principal and interest go to repay the bank for the money you borrowed. The tax contribution you make is for the property taxes. So many banks, if you're not putting a minimum 20% down, require that the borrower give the bank 3 months of escrow payments for taxes, plus every payment will include a monthly contribution to pay the property taxes. So every quarter, the bank takes all this money collected and pays your quarterly property tax with it, keeping those 3 months in escrow for the entire length of the loan. So here's the thing, though. As you know and I know, most property taxes go up over time. Therefore, your tax contribution will be adjusted every year or every quarter or every month, depending on how much increase the taxes are. So your P&I on a fixed rate loan stay the same. It's always the same, your P&I, principal and interest on a fixed rate loan. Your tax contribution, however, can change, and it usually goes up. So you're going to pay more for the taxes. Insurance costs are not about homeowners insurance or mortgage protection insurance that you buy to protect you if you die and all that stuff. Insurance is against the bank's potential loss of money should you default and you don't have enough of the down payment to qualify in a certain program. Let's say you only have 5% down payment. The bank wants you to have a bigger interest, a bigger contribution to the loan. But if that's all you got and they decide to make a loan, we're going to talk about the difference of the conventional loan, which has a PMI or private mortgage insurance, and the FHA, which is an MIP, a mortgage insurance premium. That will change over time based on the amount of the loan. So usually the contributing interest payment may go down over time, and in some loans be eliminated totally once you hit a percentage of equity in the property. So again, I don't want to give false impressions that, oh, your payments stay the same all the time. For a fixed rate loan, your principal and interest payment stays the same. Your tax contribution on your monthly payment usually goes up. The mortgage interest, if you have one, usually stays the same or goes down over a period of time, and then in some loans can be eliminated totally. But again, we're going to talk about the differences after our coffee break, and we'll talk about how different programs apply insurance differently. Did anybody have any basic questions on what a PITI payment is? Principal, interest, tax, and insurance. What was the insurance part of PITI? Boy, Andrew, I just went over that, so let me go over it again. It's usually mortgage insurance, not homeowners insurance or anything like that. And as I said, I will talk about these things further after the coffee break, but it's usually for people who don't put more than X amount percentage down on the property. And I will explain it further, I promise, when we talk about certain loan programs. Was there any other questions? Not seeing any. Then let's move on. Now, when someone applies for a mortgage, upon completing the mortgage application with a creditor, the creditor is required to provide within 3 days after the home or after the mortgage has been submitted, the application for mortgage has been submitted to the creditor, Within 3 business days, they must provide the borrower the booklet called Your Home Loan Toolkit. And a home loan toolkit covers many different topics. Things like how to determine affordability, how credit scores affect the availability of mortgage money, how to choose the right mortgage and down payment, understanding the trade-off between points and interest rates, the value of shopping several lenders, and how to avoid pitfalls and handle problems. So this home loan toolkit is a thing the creditor gives that borrower 3 days after they make a loan application. Now, the bank is not required to explain this booklet to you and won't. Hey, Mr. Banker, I got this booklet. Yeah, it's the home loan toolkit. What's about these topics? Can you explain it? No, I'm sorry, you're on your own. Well, here is an opportunity for a buyer's agent to shine. Think about it. You're working with a buyer who wants to buy a house, so they make an application for a mortgage. The mortgage company sends them this home loan toolkit. The bank says, you're on your own. We're not helping you. So who are they going to turn to? Their agent. You're the buyer's agent helping them. So they say, hey, Mr. Agent, the bank sent this thing. They don't explain it. What is it? Guys, get yourself a copy of the home loan toolkit on top of page 243 in your hardbound 14th edition of the book. There's a link to a PDF that you can download, and there's also a link to a Spanish version of it. Download these files, guys. Read these topics. Understand what they're saying, so when your buyers come to you, you can look like the consummate professional you are. But if you don't, then they're going to say, help me with this. You say, oh, I don't know. And how good of a professional do you look by saying, oh, I don't know? Not very good. So again, a buyer's agent is not required to do this. But as a courtesy, guys, in helping your clients, you want to understand what they're going through. So get and download a copy. Do it in English and Spanish so you have reference for both types. To say, hey, this is what they're talking about, how to determine affordability, your income and expenses, the cost of the mortgage, how can you afford it? You can now sit and chit-chat and educate your consumers. I got to tell you, when I started doing that with my consumers, people looked at me and said, boy, you really know your stuff. And the thing is, that's my profession. That's what I do. And besides, I'm not a mortgage guy. I'm not required to know this or explain it. I could easily say, forget you, go find out from somebody else. Go Google it. How professional does that make me look? Not. Guys, here's an opportunity for you to say, here's how this works and what it explains to you. Your buyers are going to sing your praises after they buy their house. You got to use, let's see, Andrew, he really took the time to explain these things to me where no one else would. You think you might get a reference or two and a referral business, which costs you no advertising dollars? Guess what? It will. But if you sit there, well, I don't know what it means, it's you're on your own. How many referrals do you think you're going to get from that? Yeah, 0. So guys, take the time, download these documents, read what they are. So when people come to you, you can sit and have an intelligent conversation and be the star that you want to be. But you have to be proactive here and learn these things. I see questions. What are the questions? Oh, now I don't see any questions. Nicholas, no, I'm not going to post the link because it's right in your book, right in the chapter. And again, your hardcover textbook, page 243, top of the page, second paragraph gives you the links right there. Okay. James, it is illegal for real estate agents to steer buyers to certain home loan institutions. Okay. Was there a question regarding that, James? Or did you just want to make a statement? Yeah, you can contact. You can ask Noel or Lauren, whoever's online with you at noon today. Or I'm sorry, I guess they're not going to be online with you. Apparently, they may be available after school is over today, from what I'm told. But again, you can always contact the office in some way and request how to pick up a book. You have to pay for it, but yeah, you can come in and get one. We have them right here. There's the Home Loan Tool Kit, 28 pages long. Could be. What, you want to know the name of the book? This is the name of the book. Dearborn Publishing, Essentials of New Jersey Real Estate, 14th edition. Was there any other questions about your home loan toolkit before we move on? For commission, is it legal for a real estate broker to steer buyers to a bank? Okay, hang on a second. I think we're drifting again, way off topic. We never talked about referring banks or mortgage companies or anything like that. So, James, I'm trying to understand why you're bringing that conversation into this opportunity now. You should be holding that so when we get to those points, we will discuss those. But again, please, guys, I understand your thirst for knowledge. I really do. But please try not to jump ahead or steer us in a different direction. It just confuses the class. So please, please, just understand that I'm going to get to these topics, maybe not in your time, but I will get to them. It is 10:30. It is time for a coffee break. So I'm going to leave the conversation open and rejoin you at 11, at which time we'll pick up our talk and talk about conventional, FHA, and VA loans and other programs. So I will see you at 11. Okay, it's 11. It's time to get started again, and we're talking about mortgages. And we were talking about your home loan toolkit. And I think I answered some questions. There was one person asking questions, and apparently the same question for a couple different times. And I didn't answer the question. And it was James Johnson. You asked several times, for commission, is it legal for real estate brokers to steer buyers to a bank? Well, I'm going to have to address that right now, and just hopefully you guys understand where we're coming from. Number one, it could be illegal. However, especially if you're getting something like a kickback, an illegal payment unbeknownst to your broker or the buyer, it could be very illegal for you to participate in that kind of activity because illegal kickbacks are illegal. Secondly, when referring service providers, the job of a realtor is not to focus on one company, because what if I'm pushing my own company and I don't explain a conflict of interest? That's illegal. Therefore, as a service provider reference, I'm going to give a minimum of at least 3 service providers in any branch that a person's looking for. So they're looking for an attorney, I'm going to give them a list of at least 3 different attorneys. They can choose their own. If I were to give them one and something happened, who are they going to blame? Me. Plus, what if I'm related to that attorney, or some arrangement was given that every client he gets, he slips me a buck or two? That's an illegal kickback, and the IRS can take me to court for that. So guys, please understand, and James, when you ask the question over and over again, apparently you have some other agenda on your plate or something about this, but understand, it would be illegal for me to recommend one service provider and then get kickbacks from them. That's completely illegal. So to answer your question, yes, it's illegal but always recommend a minimum of 3 service providers to avoid such an issue. So I'm going to get off that horse. I'm going to moderate the conversation and get back to our text. All right. Again, these are the topics that are discussed in the booklet. So let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Now, this booklet, Home Loan Toolkit, is available in English and Spanish, as I said. And what happens is when that mortgage provider that client made an application to, within 3 business days, must provide the Home Loan Toolkit. They must also provide the initial loan estimate to that consumer based on the agreement or discussion they had at application. Now, that loan product and payment schedules may change over time as the buyer becomes more and more aware of different programs and benefits of using financing in different ways. So it is an initial loan estimate that the creditor gives the borrower along with the home loan toolkit, as well as something called the closing disclosure documents, where it shows in a sample format where monies come from and where monies go to in a closing. So it would show that the buyer gets a credit from the bank of the mortgage, which then is given to the seller as credit at closing to pay for the house, and it gets a little involved. So understand, guys, your job is to help people just understand documents. That's all. Just to understand them, what they're used for. These are samples. This is an example of what the final documentation will look like, etc., etc. All right, now let's move on. We're going to talk about conventional FHA, VA loans, and other types of loans. So starting off with conventional loans. By definition, a conventional loan is a 2-party transaction, you and the bank. There is no other entity, no government agency, no one else except you and the bank. Conventional loans usually are structured where the borrower has a minimum of 20% down payment and finances usually a maximum of 80% loan to value. However, because of the competition generated from low down payment loans like the FHA First Time Borrowers Program, conventional loans are now starting to morph into more user-friendly loans. So they'll take an applicant with 10% down instead of the required 20%. They'll take an applicant with 5% down. And if so, then the conventional loan between two parties will probably and most likely include something called private mortgage insurance, PMI. Private mortgage insurance is a self-insurance program the bank charges the consumer for protecting the bank against a position where the borrower defaults on the loan. The bank must foreclose and then sell that home through auction or through a broker from an REO perspective. The idea is this. In a conventional loan with normal 20% down payment, they don't charge PMI because they already have a 20% equity portion in the property when they repossess it through foreclosure. So if they were to turn around and sell that to the consumers, they would have a 20% window of buffering here to collect enough funds to pay off the existing mortgage. Now, in the case where the borrower puts less than 20% down, let's say they're only putting 5% down, then the bank has a 95% loan to value ratio, which is very risky for the bank. Because if the consumer defaults on the loan and they have to foreclose, they only have a 5% window of protection against equity. And if the mortgage markets are crazy, that means the real estate markets are crazy and volatile. And if the value of that property drops, they're going to be exposed to risk. So they charge the borrower a private mortgage insurance based on the amount of the loan borrowed. That's payable every month in a loan payment until the borrower reaches a 22% equity portion. Once 22% equity is realized, meaning a 78% loan to value ratio exists, then the conventional loan is required to automatically drop the private mortgage insurance payment because they've established the threshold of a minimum of 80% loan to value ratio. Before I go any further, does anybody have any questions on the terms or concepts I'm using and how it applies to this conventional loan? I'm not seeing any, so I am going to move on. Oh, there is a question, so I'll wait. Will the bank notify you when you reach the 78% threshold? The answer is yes, they will, because on July 29, 1990, PMI was required to be discontinued by the bank when the borrower hits a 78% LTV. Now, that means if you were paying private mortgage insurance and you weren't sure of where your equity portion was, you call the bank and say, where are we? They say, well, you're still at 80%. Now, here's the thing. They could drop the PMI at 80%, but are required to drop it at 78%. So the borrower should be responsible to know where they're at with LTV. And here's the other thing. Let's say the market's good and your home appreciates in value. Then you could reach that 78% LTV much quicker than the normal schedule. So what you would do is hire an appraiser to give you a value, present it to the bank. If they challenge that, they'll pay for their own appraiser. If their appraiser also agrees that you've reached that threshold quicker, then they're required to drop the PMI. But if the market takes a downturn, then you're going to take longer to reach that 78% LTV, and you're going to just have to stick it out until you reach it. Hopefully I answered your questions. Was there any others before I move on? Good question, James. All right, there is. Okay, so I'll hang on. Nicholas, you got a question. And Saad. What happens if is removed and the market drops? Will they reapply it? No, Nicholas, they won't. So you paid 22% of the principal, correct? You've reached a 22% equity portion. No, you didn't pay 22% of the principal. The principal is the amount of money you borrowed. It depends on your percentage of loan to value ratio. If I purchase a house for $350,000, appraises for $400,000, am I still paying PMI my 5% down payment? Until you reach a 78% LTV, then yes. Until you reach the 78% LTV with a conventional loan. But when you do hit that 78%, then the bank is required to automatically drop it. I hope I answered your questions. Was there any others before we move on? Okay, not seeing any, I am going to moderate the conversation and move on. So conventional loans, once again, a two-party transaction, you and the bank. If you're putting 20% down and you're using an 80% LTV, no PMI. But if you're putting less than 20% down, then required PMI until a 78% LTV is achieved, then the bank is required to stop charging the private mortgage insurance. All right, moving on. FHA insured loans. This is a three-party loan. You, the bank making the loan, and the Federal Housing Authority that operates under the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So an FHA loan is one where the bank, and by the way, the FHA does not lend money directly. They work as insurers. As if you think about it, the FHA is like an insurance company. To insure the bank's equity position when a borrower pays less than 20% down payment. So let's look at this once again. I'm looking for a very low down payment loan. So the FHA offers a loan called the 203B loan. It's the most popular loan they offer. It is also known as the first-time home buyer's loan. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you may qualify under the FHA 203B loan program to put down as little as 3.5% down payment to purchase a house. So that means you're financing 96.5% loan to value. That's a lot of debt. However, it makes purchasing of homes much more attainable by many more people who can qualify under the 203B program. Once again, the 203B program is for first-time purchasers. So if you're a first-time purchaser buying a home, you can put down as little as 3.5% down payment, and you finance then 96.5% loan compared to the value, or LTV, loan to value. Now, under the conventional loan, the banks wants percentages up to 20%. Same thing with the FHA, except, and here's the big issue. The FHA used to stop charging MIP, mortgage insurance premium, on the loan. after you reach the LTV of 78%, then they'd stop charging. But today, it's for the life of the loan. Ooh, what? Well, there are cases where it may not be for the life of the loan. Let me explain. Borrowers will, if they're putting as little as 3.5% down, they have to pay 1.75% of the loan amount as a insurance premium cost at closing. Then every month, pay based on a 1.55% of the additional loan amount for the year to the bank as protection against default. So the only way to get rid of MIP once you hit a 20% or 78% LTV is to refinance through a conventional loan. So guys, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're working with buyers who can qualify for the 3.5% down payment, they're probably going to go for that 203B program where they're paying MIP, Mortgage Insurance Premium. That's the mortgage program for FHA loans. Remember, PMI was for a conventional loan. MIP, KEYMOU. Oh, I'm sorry, I got lost. An MIP, Mortgage Insurance Premium, is charged for a FHA loan. Now, the MIP is for the life of the FHA loan. So, Mrs. Borrower, you're buying a home using a 3.5% down payment, you're paying MIP. Once you hit 20% equity in the property and you get proved that through an appraisal, you should then refinance your loan into a conventional loan. And since you've got 20% equity, you don't have to pay PMI on the conventional loan, and you save money from the insurance premium. So in other words, if you're buying a house with low down payment FHA programs, once you hit that 80% LTV, it's time to convert or refinance your loan into a conventional loan. Because you have the equity, you won't be charged PMI under the conventional loan. Did anybody not follow what I was just throwing out there? Because it's an important thing to remember these things, because you're going to be counseling buyers, guys, and you want to look out for their interest. If I purchase a house, okay, we did that. All right. Anybody? Okay, Farhana, you have a question. We just got this done, and I guess now it's good. Congratulations. You just bought a house? Congratulations to you. Now you understand how it worked. Gotcha. All right. Anybody else with a question? When refinancing, are you required to come up with another down payment? Probably not. There are many refinancers out there that say no closing costs. So they'll incorporate the closing costs into the loan amount and no out of pocket for you. But there's many different programs. How do you qualify for an FHA loan? Well, you have to have credit scores that support it, and there's many different things that go into it. Does the MIP depend on how long the loan term is? No. It's based on the amount being borrowed. I got 3% down on a conventional loan in February. Yeah, they're competing now with FHA by offering these low down payment programs. But Nicholas, just remember, you're going to pay PMI until you hit 78% LTV. And if markets continue to increase, you'll hit that point faster than not. How much could the MIP, again, Manuel, look in your book. The MIP on an FHA 203B 244, page 244 in your textbook, shows that at closing, a lump sum premium of 1.75% of the loan amount is charged as your insurance premium. And also, borrowers also pay as much as 1.55% a year as additional mortgage insurance premiums on the loan amount. So that's the cost of it. Let's see. Can you get an FHA loan if you already own a property? Simnia, I don't recall the time frame, but I think you have to not have borrowed money or gotten a loan within the past, I think it's 7 years to qualify. But you have to talk to a mortgage guy to clarify that. Just got it removed due to renovations of market value. Good. Can you only qualify for an FHA loan once in a lifetime? As I said, if you have used it no less than 7 years, I believe you could requalify, but again, check with your mortgage lenders to find out. How common are USD? I don't know, but we'll talk about it when we get there, James. So please, again, don't jump ahead. We will get there. All right, already answered, Guy. All right, anybody else? I don't see any questions, so let me modify and move on. Once again, to summarize, conventional loans are two-party transactions, you and the bank. FHAs are three-party, you, the bank, and the FHA, who works as an insurer to the bank against loss of equity should the borrower default. In a conventional loan, you got to put 20% down or more to get no PMI, but if you're putting less, then you must pay private mortgage insurance until you had a 78% LTV, loan to value. Then the bank will automatically remove the PMI. In an FHA loan, you pay 1.75% of the loan amount as a premium at closing, and then 1.55% of the loan amount in the calendar year you make your payments as a premium, and that's for the life of the loan. I think we got it down, so let's move on. VA guaranteed loans. Now, let me just preface this by saying this. If you are a veteran or are married to a veteran, the VA loan is where you want to go to buy a house. Why? Because you're a veteran. You establish your certificate of eligibility when you leave the service with a minimum of an honorably discharged DD-214 form. Now, when you are discharged with a minimum honorable discharge, you have to meet certain requirements to be classified as a veteran. And I say it's the best loan for many different reasons I'm going to explain in a minute. To be eligible as a veteran, you have to have served a minimum of 90 consecutive days of active service during wartime, or a minimum of 181 days of active service during peacetime, or met a minimum of 6 years in the reserves or the National Guard. Have a minimum of a honorable discharge, then you can get your certificate of eligibility from the VA by applying for it. Once you do, then you are qualified to take advantage of the VA benefits, and one of those benefits is low and sometimes zero down payment mortgages. What was that? Yeah, zero down payment mortgages. Wow. And here's the other benefit. Since you're a veteran, you're going to get an under market interest rate because the federal government is going to subsidize that interest rate to you. That's incredible. So to qualify, once again, you must be a veteran meeting those qualifications, or the only alternative person that can use the VA benefit is the unremarried widowed spouse of the veteran. So if you were married to a veteran who passed away and didn't use their VA benefit, you could. But once you remarry, then you give up the ability to take advantage of the VA benefit here. Before I continue, does anybody have any questions about a VA guaranteed loan? Okay, let me continue. Oh, there is. Okay, so I'll hang on. And there's still more I got to talk about. So does the VA have to die during? You mean the veteran? Does the veteran have to die during their term of service? No. So long as you are an unremarried widowed spouse of a service member, then you can qualify for the VA benefit. Unmarried widows, and an unmarried widow doesn't lose the loan if she marries and it is already established. No, once she takes advantage of the VA benefit and then remarries, perfectly okay. However, she'll no longer be able to reestablish her certificate of eligibility once she remarries. But for the current loan she enjoys, it won't be cancelable on her. She still gets that benefit. I think that's what you're asking, Mike, and I hope I explained that as a proper response to your question. So I'm gonna, not seeing any more questions, move on. Now, again, I said the VA offers a 0 down payment loan. The veteran, if they can qualify to meet the mortgage payments, can buy a house with 0 down payment. This is alone an incredible thing. You don't have to be discharged to take advantage of the VA purchasing power of the VA loan. You can still be an active duty service person to get advantage. If you have a parent or relative that has never used their VA loan, that may be a source of financing if they would become an investment partner with you. I'm just saying. So check with your relatives to see if they use their VA benefit. If not, and they want to get into real estate with you, you got a source of 0 down payment ability. Wow. In the case of a, excuse me, in the case of a 0 down payment loan or any other VA loan, the borrower, the veteran, only has to pay a funding fee. I don't have a price tab on funding fees. You don't have to pay mortgage insurance premiums or private mortgage insurance. Nope. And here is the most outrageous thing. The VA doesn't lend money to these veterans. The only time the VA will lend money to a veteran is if the veteran needs a specially adapted place to live because of their service-connected wounds or disability. That's the only case the VA makes a direct loan. Otherwise, regular banks make the loan. And regular banks love to make these loans. You know why? Well, wait a minute, they're putting 0 down. There's a big exposure here to equity loss should the borrower default. No, there isn't, because the Veterans Administration guarantees to the bank that if the veteran defaults on their loan, the VA will protect the bank against a 25% equity position. What was that? So the veteran borrows some money, buys a house. He defaults on the loan, the bank forecloses. The VA pays the bank 25% of the value of the property when purchased to protect the bank against loss. So now the bank owns the property through default at 75% of its original value. So if they have to auction it off and sell the property, they stand very little chance of losing money on the transaction. So they love these deals and are very willing to work with veterans to lend them money. It is the regular bank in the corner that gives the VA loan to the borrower. So once again, potential of 0 down payment. And here's another thing. A veteran could refinance their existing loan, even if it's with another source, for 0, I'm sorry, they'll do 100% refinancing to the veteran. So now let me propose the following scenario. If you're thinking of you're a thinking person, think of this. You have a relative who's a veteran who's never used their benefit. They're interested in getting into the investment business. So you join up with them, locate a multifamily home. And I'm saying a 3-family home, let's say, 2 or 3 family home. The veteran can qualify to buy that property for 0 out-of-pocket down payment. Then he must occupy the property. So he lives in the property as a tenant, except it's his property. And I'm using a 3-family because of the chance of paying off all your debt is much greater with a 3-family, where your tenants then, through the rent you charge, pay off all the monthly expenses of the operational costs of the building and pay off your mortgage debt for you through the rent you collect. Now, here's the veteran. He's had no out-of-pocket expenses. He has a free place to live, if you think about it, because his tenants are paying all the bills. He doesn't have to pay rent. It's his building. If he's got a job, he's saving his income because he's got no housing expenses. And then, several years into it, refinances for 100% value, takes the cash out along with the savings from his income, buys another 3-family. The two together are paying off all their bills associated with the property. So you and your veteran, or the veteran at least, lives for free and his tenants pay all his bills. And at some point in the future, he could refinance those properties again with the same VA bill, 100% refinancing, take his cash out along with savings, and buy a nut. You see where this is going? In investment circles, they call this pyramiding through refinancing. The veteran already has a leg up because he's got no out-of-pocket. His tenants are paying all his expenses. His job, since he has no expenses, he keeps his income in a savings or something, a long-term investment. So then several years down the road, he refinances the property, takes out all the cash because the veterans will give him 100% refinancing, takes his savings, and then buys another house. Got to tell you guys, there's a method to the madness out there, but you got to think, how can I use these programs to my benefit? So the VA loan, once again, 0 down payment possibility, 100% refinancing, owner-occupant, single or up to 4-family homes. Veteran must live in it. All the veteran has to pay is a funding fee, no down payment, and he can live there rent-free, expense-free, et cetera, as per the scenario I painted. And another thing about the VA loan, as I said earlier today and I said yesterday, the VA loan is the only one that of all the residential loans to consumers, the VA loan is the only one that is 100% fully assumable even by non-veterans. So if that veteran wants to sell his house, if the borrower can qualify, he can assume the veteran's under market interest rate loan. So long as they can qualify to make those payments, they can assume that loan. They don't have to be a veteran to get it. Anybody can assume them so long as they can qualify. Anybody have any questions about the VA program? You see, I get a little worked up over this because, guys, I got to tell you, every time I list a property, I always ask the seller, what kind of financing did you use to buy the house? And when someone says I used a VA loan, I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Here's another way to sell a house because that loan may be assumable by somebody who wants to qualify for it. And they're getting an under market interest rate, which is a bigger incentive for the buyer to assume it, and it opens doors to more selling opportunities for the seller. That means I can make more commission doing it. But I got to ask the questions so I know what to do. Questions? Okay, Jaden and John, you had a question. Would you have to be a veteran to qualify for that loan after them? No. But to assume the loan you're talking about, non-veterans can assume a VA loan. Yes. Okay. How do you know if a seller has an assumable plan? I asked them, John. As the realtor listing their property, I always ask for a lien disclosure statement. 2 reasons. One is I want to see if they're not upside down and they can't pay me a commission if I sell their house. I don't work for free. Secondly is to see what kind of financing is. So if I discover they have a VA loan, just makes another opportunity for me to sell that house in a different way. So you have to ask the question. And I've been saying this from day one, guys, you've got to ask questions, a lot of them. Information is your weapon to succeed in this business. Kimberly and James, you have questions? Got it. All right, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed something here. If you let someone assume a VA loan, does the VA have the option by using the VA benefits to purchase a new home? Yes, Kimberly. If that veteran has their loan assumed or they pay off their loan, they can reestablish their eligibility through the VA to qualify for another VA loan. Yes, they can. If the veteran inherits the home, can they use the VA loan to refinance the mortgage? Up to 100% of value, James. Yes. So guys, I'm telling you secrets here that you don't get in any other course, and that there's ways to use these programs for your benefit. If you are a veteran or related to one, you can help them establish a very nice source of income and build a real estate empire by doing certain basic things. Just think, how can I use this to my benefit? What ways can I use this loan to increase wealth? And there's many ways. All right. I'm going to move on. I'm not seeing any more questions. All right. Now, there are other financing options in New Jersey. Number one, and we're almost done here with the chapter, believe it or not. So we're pretty much on time to break at noon. Number one is the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency. You may have never heard about this. Well, the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agencies offers below market interest loans with low or no down payment to qualified buyers who want to buy in certain urban target areas. Did you hear what I said? You can qualify for below market interest loans with low or no down payments if you buy a home in a certain urban target area. It's used for the purchase of 1, 2, 3, or 4 family dwellings. It is not available to investors. The owner must intend to occupy the property when they buy it. If you're interested, you can contact 1-800-NJ-HOUSE or www.state.nj.us-dca-hmfa. The address is in the last paragraph on the page of 247 of New Jersey Home Buyers Programs. To find out more about these, to see if you could qualify, but again, once again, it's only for purchasing homes in specific urban target areas. Then you can infer yourself. I don't want to go into any detail about that. Now, there's another program called the Farmers Home Loan. Farmers Home Loan, what's that? Well, the Farmers Home Loan used to be for people who buying farms, but not too many people buying farms in New Jersey anymore. So they renamed it and now call it the Rural Economic Community Development Program, where for low and moderate income earners, mortgage rates can be subsidized to as low as 1%, and only modest homes qualify to purchase. If you're interested, this is a program that does direct lending from the Department of Agriculture, the FDA. Someone asked earlier before about that. Now is where we're discussing that. The Farmers Home Loan, now called the Rural Economic and Community Development Program, is for low and income first-time home buyers with interest subsidized to as low as 1%, and it's directly from the FDA. There is a web address in your book you can copy and paste or use to find any information you want about that. In effect, we're done with this chapter. Did anybody have any follow-up questions before I pull up the review questions for the chapter review? There is a spelling error. It says farmers, not farmers. Thank you, Omer. Let me stop the presses and stop class. But thank you. I know there's a lot of typos all over the place everywhere. Is the Farmers Home Loan the same as the USDA loan? James, can you give me an example what you mean as the USDA loan? Can you specify that? Can you get FHA loan if you have any debt? Sure. Sure you can, but not too much. I mean, you have to be able to pay the bank back. If you qualify, you can get one. Yeah, you can. If you guys are interested, by the way, FHA makes loan to credit borrowers with as low as credit as 620. There are some mortgage lenders out there that may exceed that, and I do know one guy, he may go down to as low as 580 on your credit scores and still make the loan. So just because you don't have perfect credit doesn't mean you can't get a loan. Where would you find out what income levels qualify for the HARP? By contacting, let's see if we find it again. I'll read it to you, www.usda.gov/topics/rural/housing assistance. You can find out directly from them what the terms and conditions are. And it's right in your paragraph, second paragraph under Farmers Home Loan in the text. Was there any other questions before we do the reviews? When my wife and I bought a house, there was a USDA loan which would approve low or moderate income earners to buy in rural areas. They would fund up to 100% of the loan. Okay. I'm not aware of that in New Jersey. Was that in New Jersey, James? Yes. Okay. So it's more towards rural areas, apparently. South Jersey. That's probably why I never heard of it. I've never been, well, I have sold properties down there, but not in the way you're talking about. So it may still exist. I don't know that. It's not in your book. You don't have to know it for the exam, but it could still exist. I'm speculating. Was there anybody else with a question? Ah, that's nice. Was there limits on income or things like that? Oh, it's for low and moderate income earners. I gotcha. Okay. So it's a subsidized program. I see what you're saying. Gotcha. Anybody else with a question before we move on? Sangeeta, we almost got the USDA loan, but the property had to be in an eligible rural area. Okay, there you go. Okay. And there are income limits. Excellent. All right, guys, good. I'm going to moderate the conversation. I'm going to close this out and bring up the review questions for chapter review. So hang on a sec. And this is chapter, what are we on, 14. So let me pull up the review questions for chapter 14, and we will do these now. Number one, a savings and loan institution offers a mortgage plan with 80% LTV. On the purchase of a $240,000 property, how much down payment is required? Yeah, there's some math, guys. Get your calculators out. It's not brain busting math, please. Don't moan and groan. You're going to have to do math. Come on. And I'll work the problems out with you, believe me. No, I'm going to watch you suffer. And no, I'm going to help you. Try to work it out first, and then I'll help you. All right. Let's see what we got. Well, I was hoping for a few more responses than that. There's about 25% of attendees are answering the questions. I would really hope that boosts the number in a few minutes. Let's see what happens. All right, from those who did respond, much less than 50% of the class, 89% of you are correct, answering B for boy, 48,000. And the answer is why is because 80% loan to value means they're putting down 20% of the purchase price as a down payment. So $240,000 times 80% equals, no, hang on a second. 240,000 times 80% equals a purchase price of 192. Okay, so they're putting down $48,000 as a down payment. 10% would be 224,000. 20% would be 48,000. Good, you got it. Mostly you got it correct. B for boy. Number 2, a borrower obtains a $150,000 mortgage at 5% interest. If the monthly payments of the 80515 payment are credited first on interest and then on principal, what is the balance of the principal after the borrower makes the first payment? Now, this is going to take you a couple minutes to figure out. I will work it out with you. Don't worry. But I'm trying to see if you can figure that one out by yourself. Let's see what we come up with. Okay, so very few people answering the question. So let's work it out. First of all, borrower obtains a $150,000 mortgage amount at 5% interest, which means, and now here's the thing you have to remember, we do not do compound interest calculations. We do simple interest calculations. The tests are always around simple interest calculating, not compounding. So, to determine how much interest is being paid at a loan, you take the loan amount times the interest rate, or $150,000 times 5%, equals $7,500 per year, the interest amount of payment is. Now I want to know what the monthly contribution is, so divide by 12. That gives me $625 per month being paid towards interest. The payment is $805.15. So $805.15 minus $625 equals $180.15 per month that goes towards principal after the first payment. So that means $150,000 minus $180.15 gives me a balance on the principal after the first payment of $149,819. It should say an 85 cents, but forget they rounded it. So it's $149,819. B for boy is how you solve the equation. Let me run through it one more time. The interest of 5% on a $150,000 loan is $7,500 per year. Divide by 12 gives me $625 per month for interest payment. Total payment was $805.15 minus $625 equals a principal contribution of $180.15 on the first payment. Apply that against the $150, you get a mortgage principal balance of $149,819 after the first payment is made. B for boy. Number 3, a seller took back a 30-year note and mortgage from the buyer. However, The seller wants the whole remaining debt paid off at the end of the 5th year. The buyer has a what? So apparently there's only about a 40 to 45% participation in these questions from our attendees. Guys, I'm not requiring you to answer the questions. You can just observe, but I'm going to tell you, unless you test your limits, you don't know what your limits are. So do yourself a favor. This is a free practice. Make your mistakes in practice so when it comes time to the test, you perform to your abilities. I'm just giving you advice here, that's all. So the buyer has a what? And the answer, of which 83% of you are correct of those who did respond, is C, balloon payment. Yes. Number 4, with some exceptions, a homeowner may take as income tax deductions and we were talking about residential properties in which you live. We're not talking about investment properties, just in your primary residence. Investment properties have a whole different tax calculation and deduction schedule. And we will go over that, yes. So with some exceptions, a homeowner may take as income tax deductions what? And from those who have responded, about 62% of you got it correct. B, the mortgage interest paid. You can't deduct your insurance premiums at all. Just the mortgage interest paid. And the other one was your property taxes up to $10,000. Number 5, the terms index, margin, and cap are used in evaluating what type of mortgage? And from those responding, 91% of you, Tim likes this, well, 91% of you got it correct. D, an adjustable rate mortgage, D. Number 6, the seller sells his home for $300,000 and agrees to pay 3 points to his buyer's lending institution. The buyer is putting 20% down on the property. How much will the points cost the seller? Gee, this question looks familiar, doesn't it? Just saying. And from those who did respond, about 60% of you answered correctly. But let me calculate it out first. 300,000 times 20% is $60,000. So that's the down payment. So they're financing $240,000. Sound familiar? Like I just did this question about 10 minutes ago. So if they're financing $240,000, 1 point is equivalent to 2,400. You got to put 3 points, so times 3, and C is the correct answer. About 2/3 you actually had C correct, $7,200. Number 7, a lending institution may require the buyer to send in extra money to cover future bills for what could change in your monthly payment. Normally on a fixed rate loan they're talking about, most likely. And from, again, very limited response of people, the answer is, of which 67% of you are correct, is A, property taxes and insurance premiums. Remember, they can change, but the principal and interest payment usually stay the same. Number 8, which of the following is an example of a conventional loan? Which of the following is an example of a conventional loan? B for boy, 56% of you are correct answering B, a second loan for home improvement secured through a credit union. FHA, VA are 3-party loans. Conventional is a 2-party loan. B is the only answer. Number 9, private mortgage insurance, PMI, is required whenever the excuse me. And from those who responded, 91% of you are correct, and it is D for dog. Buyers putting less than 20% down a conventional loan. PMI means conventional. For FHA, it's MIP. Remember that. Number 10, the Department of Housing and Urban Development insures mortgage loans made through So the Department of Housing and Urban Development insures mortgage loans made through the FHA. 85% of you answered correctly A. Last question before we break for lunch. Number 11. No down payment is required for loans made through resounding 97.5% of respondents got it correct. B for boy, the VA. Okay, guys, time to break for lunch. It's 12 o'clock. There is no admins coming on at 12 o'clock to answer your administrative questions. However, I am going to just post a link in the meantime that you can get to at recareercenter.com. And, oh, sorry, that should be an